When I left the high-stakes world of corporate investigations to start my own detective agency, I had no idea what awaited me. I hoped for a quieter life, but trouble seemed to follow me. My wife, Sammy, was initially supportive, excited for a more settled life. However, as the cases got more complex, the line between personal and professional life blurred. One evening, after a tough case, I found Sammy distant. Our conversations were strained, filled with awkward silences. Despite my efforts, it was clear something was wrong. My investigative skills only seemed to make things worse. When Danny brought her in, I knew this woman would bring chaos. It wasn't entirely her fault, but the trouble was obvious as soon as she stepped in. "Hello, Mr. Carter?" she asked nervously. I could tell she was married, like most of my clients. "Nick Carter, ma'am," I replied. "Not the singer. I sometimes get his mail. My dad named me after a spy from Jove Publishing novels. Just Nick, not Nicholas. Anyway, what can I do for you?" "Your assistant said you could help me. A former client referred me." She smiled nervously. "I see. Okay, Mrs. Janine Linder. My husband Dennis is a psychologist. I believe he's cheating, and I need proof before I file for divorce." She handed me his picture. I raised an eyebrow, studying the photo. He was in his early 40s, with a square jaw, dark hair graying at the temples, and bright green eyes that likely charmed many women. "Okay, ma'am. Do you know how this works?" I asked. She nodded. "Give me up to 2 weeks and I'll get the proof you need. My fee is $5,000 for 2 weeks. Is that okay?" "Yes, and half up front, right?" she asked. "Do you have an account your husband can't access?" I asked. "Yes, I set it up a few months ago," she said, handing me a $2,500 cashier's check. "Your former client said you're the best." "Thank you. Can you describe his suspicious behavior? The more I know, the better." "Well, he spends every night and weekend with me, but sometimes his phone is off when I call his office at lunch," she said. "He could be with a client," I suggested. "Normally, but he's also distant at home. He used to be affectionate, but now he barely touches me. And I smelled perfume on his clothes. Not my brand." "Maybe a client hugged him," I said. "How old is he?" "He's 44, she replied. "Men can be less affectionate around that age." "Could that be why he's distant?" "You think I'm stupid?" she snapped. "No, ma'am. I just need to understand why you think he's cheating. Perfume is a strong indicator, but it could be circumstantial. I'll take the case, but I need to know everything. What else is suspicious?" "On Mondays and Wednesdays, he always calls before lunch. Sometimes he goes straight to voicemail," she said. "Okay, I'll start investigating tomorrow, Wednesday. I'll update you as soon as I have something." I shook her hand as she stood. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. I hope it's nothing, but I need peace of mind." She smiled warmly. "Any time, Mrs. Linder. If I don't find anything in 2 weeks, you won't owe me the rest of the fee. That's my guarantee." "Thank you, Mr. Carter. Call me Nick. Mr. Carter was my father." I smiled. "Okay, Nick. I'm Janine. Ma'am is too formal." "Okay, Janine. I'll contact you soon. Danny, my assistant, has your information." I walked her out, and then Danny came in, taking a seat in front of my desk. Daniela Velasquez had been my assistant for 6 years. I'd be lost without her. She has black hair, brown eyes, and a tan from her Mexican heritage. She looks like J-Lo, but with more curves. "All right, Jefe, here's what I have." She handed me the dossier she'd compiled online. Danny is a great investigator herself, and I'm proud to have trained her. Dennis Linder, psychologist. I glanced at the folder and a red flag went up. A former patient had filed a malpractice suit against him, which was mysteriously withdrawn. The patient's husband divorced her soon after. This looks suspicious. "Danny, dig deeper into this guy. I have a bad feeling about him," I said. "Haha, yeah, I know." She left the office with a laugh, and I thanked her. "Anytime, boss." She winked and returned to her desk to research Dr. Dumbass. Daniela is invaluable, and though I pay her well, she deserves even more. We're more like partners, splitting every case 60-40. Our combined annual earnings exceed $200,000, with me netting $150,000 and Danny $110,000 after taxes and expenses. We share an attorney, Wesley Quentin, who helps us legally in exchange for our services. He specializes in divorce and domestic issues. Then there's my wife, Samantha, formerly Samantha Stern. I met Sammy 7 years ago after retiring from my job in Langley, Virginia, and moving back to Los Angeles. I had been an insurance investigator, but decided to start my own detective agency after a rough case in Paris. Sammy is a knockout, standing 5'8", and we met at a party thrown by my first client. She was the daughter of his friend, and we hit it off immediately. After a year of dating, we married in a small ceremony. I spent 3 years in the Army as an interrogator before being recruited by an insurance company to investigate fraud. I excelled in the role, but eventually decided to go independent in Los Angeles. Getting a concealed carry license was tough, but now I carry my dad's old Colt 1911, a reliable .45 ACP. Shooting has always been one of my skills. I went over to where Danny was gathering details on Dennis Linder's life. "Hey, Danny, once you're done, disconnect for the day. I'm heading home," I said, smiling. "No problem, Jefe," she smiled back with more than professional respect. "I hope Sammy knows what she has at home." "I think she does. You'll make someone really happy someday if you ever settle down," I said, flirting a bit. "No, Danny, I missed my chance by a few months." She shrugged. I wanted to ask more, but she turned back to her computer. "Okay, gather your info, put it in a folder, and I'll pick it up in the morning. Good night," I said, leaving. "Good night, boss," she called out. I got in my car and headed home, thinking about how Sammy had been acting distant lately. She seemed to have something on her mind, but wouldn't talk about it. I decided to press her on it when I got home. I've seen this pattern before. Emotional detachment before or after an affair starts. When I asked her what was wrong, she always said, "Nothing." Why do women say nothing when something is clearly bothering them? We're not mind readers, after all. With these thoughts, I pulled onto our street and noticed a Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo parked in front of my house. As I pulled into the driveway, my cell phone rang. "Hey, babe," I said, seeing my wife's name on the caller ID. "Hey, Nick, when are you coming home? We need to talk," she said, sounding strange. "What do you mean? Who is we?" I suspected it was whoever drove that Jeep. "Just get home soon, okay?" "Okay, I love you," I said. "Okay, bye." Alarm bells were ringing in my head. I made sure my pocket voice recorder was ready and my phone could take pictures. Sammy had been acting strange, and now she was urgent. I calmed myself with deep breaths, then took a picture of the Jeep's license plate before heading inside, feeling uneasy. As I walked in, I saw them kissing. They didn't notice me right away, so I took a picture. Calmly, I entered the room and recorded them. "Oh my God, Nick, you scared me," Sammy said. "Care to explain why you're making out with someone in my house?" I asked. "That's why I wanted you home, Nick," she said. I looked at the guy and recognized Dennis Linder, my current target. Anger and heartbreak surged, but I knew I had to stay calm for now. Revenge would come later. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Mr. Carter, can I call you Nick?" the guy asked. "No, friends call me Nick." "You're not a friend, you're the guy messing with my wife. Got it?" I chuckled. "Yes, I'm Dr. Dennis Linder, and I treat your wife with therapy," he introduced himself. "Does therapy involve kissing my wife in my house?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I know it's unusual, but you'll have to watch us while we do it," he said. This guy was clueless, making my case stronger. "Dr. Dennis Linder, right? I hear you're good at psychology," I said, pretending to be interested. "Yes, sometimes my methods are controversial, but effective," he pouted. "And how long has my wife been seeing you for therapy?" I asked, suppressing my anger. 2 months now," he confirmed. Sammy hadn't mentioned seeing a psychiatrist. I looked at her. "Sammy, why didn't you talk to me? I told you years ago to come to me if something was wrong," I said. I guess," she hesitated, looking confused. "Sammy, remember what we talked about?" Linder said. "You need to take control." His voice was almost hypnotic and her expression stiffened. "You're right, Dennis. I need to show him I'm not just a stupid woman," she said, looking at me. "Sammy, what are you talking about? When have I ever pushed you? In the bedroom, we always do what you want," I almost shouted. "Sammy, after the wedding, we agreed to discuss new things. You just had to ask," I said. Her expression softened, but Linder's influence made her rigid again. "Nick, I need to do this. You can watch or not, but I'm doing it," she said firmly. "Sammy, don't do it. There will be consequences," I warned, shaking my head. "Mr. Carter, let me do my job. Do you have a chair in your bedroom?" Linder asked, wanting to use our marital bed. "Yes, there is. Wait, you really want me there?" I asked, horrified. "It's necessary," he said. "If you insist," I roared. "Doctor, is there no other way?" "No," he said with fake sincerity. "Well, I hope you don't expect me to engage in infidelity," I said. "Mr. Carter, what your wife and I will be doing isn't infidelity. I'm helping her overcome a mental block to improve your relationship. You'll both be stronger after this." He smiled smugly, and I fought the urge to draw my weapon. "I won't agree to that. It's infidelity, no matter what you call it," I said, noting his lack of a wedding ring. This is therapy, albeit controversial, not infidelity, he said indulgently. My love for Sammy was dead, replaced by numbness and righteous rage. I'm still not agreeing. I shook my head and followed them into the master bedroom. I discreetly pulled out my iPhone and started recording as he undressed Sammy and laid her on the bed. She spread her legs willingly, and neither noticed my recording. Last chance, I said. Don't do this. I don't consent. The doctor saw my iPhone, but didn't realize it was recording. He grinned. Like you have a choice, he sneered and proceeded. That was all I needed. I got up, grabbed him by the hair, and shot the nerve bundle between his neck and shoulder, dropping him. Doctor, did my ex-wife tell you what I do for a living? He looked confused, and Sammy was shocked. I'm a private investigator. I have proof of your affair. Now I can divorce her for infidelity and sue you for alienation of affection. I grinned and pulled out my weapon. Colonel Sam Colt makes all men equal. Get dressed, take your promiscuous, and get out. I said this calmly, scaring them both. Sammy sighed. I looked at the woman who had just broken my heart. Samantha, get dressed, pack your things, and get out, I said firmly. What? She demanded. You heard me. I warned you about the consequences, and they start now. Pack your things and leave. I'm calling my lawyer to prepare divorce papers and get a restraining order against you and the doctor. I'm glad we don't have kids. And I'm glad I won't be a father to your kids. My voice cracked slightly. Sammy, you broke my heart. I hope it was worth it. If your lover wants nothing to do with you, go live with your parents. Sammy's face showed a mix of emotions, mainly confusion. But Nick, don't you love me anymore? She asked, shocked. Not after you let another man, despite my protests, take you in our bed, I shouted. You've desecrated our wedding vows. You've shredded everything we had. I wanted her to feel the pain I felt. I can't believe I never really knew you, Samantha. I used her full name, which she hated and knew I only used when I was angry. Samantha, remember our conversation before we got married about fidelity? You said you had zero tolerance for cheaters. Well, this fits the definition. I accepted your philosophy that day. The doctor hissed before she could respond, looking ready to pounce. I held my Colt ready and kept an eye on Samantha. You're making a mistake, Mr. Carter. I'm going to press charges, he grinned. No mistake. I caught you in bed with my wife and thought she was being molested. Who will the cops believe? The respected private investigator or the man claiming it was consensual? Look at Samantha's anguish. Misery. It's good I got here in time. Maybe I should call the police and report it. His face paled as he reconsidered. Okay, no big deal. No accusations. He tried to grin, but it didn't work. I noticed he still hadn't mentioned his wife. Interesting. He probably thought he was keeping a secret from me, for now. I decided to give him a little push. I'm sure the news channels will love this. Private investigator's wife caught in bed with her counselor story at 11. I shook my head in disgust. He blushed. No, you can't go public with this, he almost shouted, quickly dressing. Please don't make it public, he begged. If you return all the fees my soon-to-be ex-wife paid you, I might consider it. But I'll still sue you for malpractice, I said, cornering him. Deal. Anything you want, he said, panicked. Anything I want? Interesting, but no. I wanted him to feel fear and despair for the devastation his life was about to become. I felt no guilt. He quickly dressed and ran out, slamming the front door behind him. I looked at Samantha, and she saw the anger in my eyes. Nick, we can get through this, she pleaded, crying crocodile tears. Please, baby. Where was baby when I came home, Samantha? Where was love? I grinned. Get dressed, pack up, and leave. You've got an hour. I suggest going to your parents' place. Samantha stared in shock, then started packing. I let her use our suitcases, knowing I'd buy new ones. I went to my office and called the locksmith in the furniture store. I promised the locksmith a huge bonus for the rush job on my locks. I ordered a new queen-size bed, sheets, and a comforter from the furniture store. When asked why I wanted to throw the old bed in the backyard, I told him I wasn't paying him to ask questions. He caught the tone in my voice and wisely stayed quiet. Samantha packed in 55 minutes. I helped by dumping her suitcases by her car trunk. Then I went back inside and slammed the door. I called Wes to get a restraining order against Samantha and Dr. Janine Linder. I also asked him to prepare divorce papers and sue for alienation of affection and unfair labor practices. An hour later, the locksmith and furniture delivery were done, and I paid them with a credit card. I then canceled Samantha's credit and debit cards through the companies and the bank manager, no longer trusting her. If you think I've gone too far, go screw yourself. I poured myself a couple of shots of chivas, needing something stronger than beer. I sipped and reflected on how my marriage had fallen apart. By 7 p.m., I felt I was about to snap and called Danny. Hola, jefe, she answered. Hi, Danny. I need your help tonight, I said, proud that 2 shots of chivas hadn't affected my clarity. What's wrong, boss man? She asked. It's complicated. I can't explain over the phone. Just come to my house, I said, feeling overwhelmed. Okay, jefe. I'll be right there. She hung up before I could respond. God bless her. 10 minutes later, she knocked on my door. I got up, opened it, and Danny rushed in, hugging me tightly. She closed the door behind her, locked it, and pulled me to the couch. She sat me down and sat next to me. So where's Sammy? Danny asked, already sensing the situation since Sammy's car wasn't in the driveway, and I wasn't as upset as if she had died. She's gone, probably to her parents. She cheated on me, Danny. I couldn't hold back my tears. Danny hugged me, letting me cry on her shoulder. When I calmed down, she gently pushed me back and looked into my eyes. Nick, are you sure Sammy was cheating? Unable to speak, I set my pocket recorder on the coffee table and pressed play. I also showed her the video on my phone. Danny watched, growing more horrified. I went to get 2 beers. When I returned, she stopped both the recording and the video, anger in her eyes. I opened the beers and handed her one. That damn witch, Danny finally said, taking a sip. Danny wasn't holding back. I smiled. She was fiercely loyal to me. After a deep breath, she asked, Nick, what are you planning? I want in. I suspect the doctor may have brainwashed Sammy. If so, I want her to get help. As for him, I want him exposed, except for his wife. She was right about his cheating, I said, my voice hoarse. That's some nonsense, Nick. What's our first step? Reconnaissance, I smiled, slipping into professional mode. I'm visiting his office in a few hours. If breaking in is too much, you don't have to come. Screw that. I'm in, jefe. I'm not backing down. She hugged me tightly. I know Sammy, Nick. I think she was at least forced into this. I hope so, but I'm not sure I want her back. She's treated our marriage like garbage. I hugged Danny, tempted to kiss her but held back. Danny, I know what you're thinking. It's tempting, but we have work to do. I steeled my resolve. We'll stop by the office and pick up the van. Good call, boss, she said, holding back her feelings. It was clear she'd always had feelings for me. We flirted, but I thought it was just harmless fun. Now that Sammy was gone, it was obvious Danny wanted more. Part of me wanted the same, but I refused to stoop to my wife's level. I didn't want to hurt Danny, especially if Sammy was truly coerced or brainwashed. Danny would be devastated if I reconciled with Sammy later. We left in her car and picked up the van from the office. I stuck Comcast magnets on the van for urban camouflage. I like it. We arrived at Dr. Dennis Linder's office around 11 p.m. I picked the lock, wearing gloves that left no fingerprints but allowed full dexterity. Once inside, I ensured my headphones were working so I could communicate with Danny. Reading you loud and clear, jefe, Danny said. I had a 50 GB USB drive ready to search his computer and file cabinet. If he was doing this to my wife, how many others were there? I called the security company, pretending to be Dr. Linder, and said I forgot my password. With an authoritative tone, they believed me without verification. Amateurs. Danny giggled in my earpiece. I know, right? I chuckled softly. I picked the lock on the doctor's office and woke his computer from sleep mode. No family photos on his desk. He clearly didn't love his wife. This guy, with a beautiful woman at home, was seducing patients. Password protected, great. Don't panic. I thought about what I knew. He was cunning with women, but not very street smart. Danny had found more dirt on him. He was a serial womanizer with malpractice and maltreatment claims mysteriously dropped. I typed Romeo as a password. Access denied. Casanova. Access denied. Lothario. Access granted. What a predictable idiot. I found the files I needed, including those on Samantha. I downloaded the special patient section, almost filling the 50 GB drive. He had videos of Sammy. I removed the drive and put the computer back to sleep. Then I checked his file cabinet. I found Sammy's file, but it had no incriminating details. He wasn't dumb enough to document everything on paper. Find anything, jefe? Danny asked through the earpiece. Plenty. No paper, but I've got about 45 gigs of video with his patients, I replied. Damn it. We'll go through them when we get home, she said, emphasizing we and home in a way that made me curious. I left the office, ensuring everything was locked and leaving no trace. No security cameras, just an untraceable phone call. It was past 1 a.m. Back at my house, I closed the garage door. Before I could speak, Danny looked at me seriously. "I'm staying with you tonight, Nick," she said firmly. "Okay, you can have the guest room," I shrugged. "No, I'll stay in your room, in your new bed. You don't have to be alone tonight." The invisible elephant was revealed. "Danny, I trust you. You're the only woman I trust right now. Please don't make me break my marriage vows tonight," I asked. "I promise." She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "We'll go over the footage in the morning. I brought my laptop so we can split the work." "Sounds like a plan," I said, heading for the shower. I felt dirty, not just physically, but emotionally. Under the water, all the feelings of betrayal rushed back. Suddenly, the shower door opened. Danny helped me to bed, covered me, and climbed in on the other side. I was numb and quickly fell asleep, exhausted. I woke up smiling. Danny hugged me tightly. I decided to address it. "Danny, listen to me, okay?" I wheezed. When she reluctantly nodded, I continued. "Danny, I'm sorry for what I said. I thought yesterday was just a nightmare. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think of you that way sometimes. But I love my wife, or who she was before that prick touched her. If Samantha agreed to all this willingly, I will divorce her. When that happens, if you still want me, I'll be willing to try it with you. Okay?" "That's one of the reasons I fell in love with you," she sighed. "You're the most honest man I've ever met." Her voice held both admiration and despair. "Thanks, sweetheart." When I went to get dressed, Danny wasn't in the room, but I heard the sizzle of a frying pan in the kitchen. I smiled, put on jeans and a t-shirt, holstered my Colt, and went to see her. I didn't usually carry a weapon at home, but I wasn't taking chances with a possibly sociopathic psychologist. I noticed Danny was carrying her 9mm Smith & Wesson too, having gotten her concealed carry permit shortly after I hired her. "Smells good," I said, genuinely smiling for the first time since this mess started. "Thanks, Nick," she smirked, focused on making an omelet with bacon, cheese, and salsa. She wore one of my old t-shirts and last night's jeans. "Danny, I know this is going to be hard for both of us," I said, sitting at the kitchen counter. She raised an eyebrow. "Boss, I didn't sign up to be patronized. You made it clear from day one that I'd be needed on some tough cases. With my background in criminal justice, you knew you could count on me. That hasn't changed and never will. I couldn't help but fall in love with you. But that doesn't mean I'll shy away from this case. It's personal for me too, because Sammy's my friend. That doctor is going to get a rude awakening when we're done with him." Everything she said was true. Danny had been an LAPD detective for 2 years, but got fired for striking up a suspect. She avoided serious charges because the guy was guilty, and they wanted to avoid the publicity. She received a small severance package to keep quiet, but told me everything during her interview. That honesty was why I hired her. I needed someone unafraid to get their hands dirty, and Danny fit the bill. "You're right," I nodded. "Danny, I need to tell you something even Sammy doesn't know." I took a deep breath, trusting Danny completely. She'd always been honest with me. "What do you mean?" she asked, confused. "Danny, I never worked for an insurance company. I worked as a covert operative for my own company. My name is Nick Carter, and I used to be a spy. Sounds like the beginning of Burn Notice, right?" Danny just looked at me, then plated our omelets and set them on the counter with our coffee. God bless Danny. "I kind of figured either that or you had a criminal record," she shrugged. "You're always looking around like someone's watching you. You know a lot about bugs, tapping phones, and picking locks. You're one of the best." I laughed. She was an incredible detective. "You're good," I said, sipping my coffee. "And you make the best coffee on earth." She laughed. "Thanks, boss. I'm not just a pretty face and a hot body, you know." She winked. "I know. If you were, I wouldn't have hired you." I shrugged. She kissed my cheek. "Thanks, Nick. No matter what, thank you for everything." "Hey, you're not leaving. You'll work with me until we're old and gray." She paused, then grinned. "You're right. I wouldn't leave even for $1 million a day." "Good, because I can't afford that, and you're the best assistant I could hope for." "I'm glad you finally recognized that, boss. Now eat before I spank you." She stuck out her tongue, and I did the same. Then I dug into the surprisingly tasty omelet. That girl can cook. There are 2 schools of thought about winning a man's heart and everything girls are taught. The first is through the stomach, and the second is through the weenie. For me, it's both. Sammy was a tornado in bed. My tornado, and she could cook pretty well. But, and here comes the but, Danny's kitchen skills put Sammy on edge. If she entertained half as well as she cooked, I'd seriously consider a swap. even if Sammy was brainwashed by Dr. Dumbass. It might sound cold, but she caved in easily without discussing anything with me. I couldn't believe she would go behind my back to a quack like Linder without telling me. It wasn't like her. She used to share everything at the beginning of our relationship. It was only in the last few months after starting therapy that she shut me out almost completely. When breakfast was over, I helped Danny with the dishes. Once we finished, she turned around and, before I could react, wrapped her arms around my neck and pulled my face to hers. "I'm sorry, Nick," she said quietly. "No, Danny, I don't think either of us are sorry about that," I chuckled. "Damn, I wish I'd met you before my wife did." "Me too," she said sadly. Damn, someone was going to get hurt no matter how things turned out. I really didn't want it to be either of them. If Sammy was coerced or brainwashed, we had to see those videos. "Let's go watch the videos. Maybe they'll shed some light on Sammy's mental state," I said. We went to my home office, and I downloaded half of the videos onto her laptop. I started where I should have started with Sammy. The first interview was straightforward, just an introduction. Dr. Dissipates was writing something in a notebook, asking Sammy questions about her life. He asked about her husband, me, and other relatives. She talked about her parents and how much she loved us all. I studied his face, a sly smile playing on his lips. He then asked a few more innocuous questions and told her not to tell anyone, as it might negatively affect their future therapy sessions. What a son of a witch. He intended to seduce her from the start, and since she was following his instructions to keep me in the dark, I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. He misused her trust in him as a medical professional. Negligent suit? Check. There were more questions in the second clip, more personal this time. He asked about our lives, writing down every answer in his infernal notebook. He asked some personal questions she didn't want to answer, but he assured her no one would ever know. She answered truthfully. At the end, he reiterated that the session should be confidential. She agreed. I checked the dates on the videotapes. There were 16 videotapes of Sammy's sessions corresponding to his Monday and Wednesday appointments. I groaned, covering my face with my hands. The third video was hard to watch, but again, he wasn't brainwashing her, just stretching professional ethics. In the fourth video, he began his devious seduction. He asked her to describe her fantasies in detail. She recounted 2 before time ran out. Again, a non-disclosure agreement, and she was on her way. The 5th and 6th videos were similar. She shared her fantasies. He reminded her to keep each video confidential, and she agreed. The rest of the videos were conversations about her fantasies related to cheating. By the end of the 14th video, he had raised her self-esteem to the level of selfishness and convinced her to have 2 men, including me, as part of her therapy. Starting with this video, he didn't encourage her to keep quiet, knowing she wouldn't tell anyone, including me. This was the 15th video where he first entertained her just under a week and a half ago. He told her he would be a second man if she wanted. She struggled with that decision for 15 minutes as he gently nudged her into his desired outcome. Finally, she gave in. The 16th clip was the last. It was similar, but this time she asked him to keep it a secret and said she would call him at the right time. I stopped the video and looked up to see Danny looking at me with tears in her eyes and a disgusted expression that probably mirrored my own. This guy was a serial seducer, a real Lothario, I said. "Yeah, that was pretty clear from his computer password," Danny added. "I'm going to punch that son of a witch with such a powerful legal blow that he'll wish he'd never been born," I vowed calmly in front of God and Danny. "I agree with you on that one, boss," she said, sitting on the edge of my desk. "It seems like the longer videos are tougher. If it makes you feel any better, all the others are shorter than Sammy's." Apparently, she lasted the longest. She shrugged and smiled encouragingly. "I kind of guessed that since everyone else here is shorter than her, but you just confirmed it. This guy makes Machiavelli look like a good guy." I shook my head. "But as far as coercion or brainwashing goes, he's not guilty. He's just convincing them to do it, saying no damage will come of it." "Yeah, I've noticed that too. As far as I can tell, he never involved the husband in his little games before, but then the husband somehow finds out and divorces his wife. All the cases I checked ended in divorce. She listed the names of the women and their ex-husbands. Okay, contact a couple of the exes and find out how they discovered Dr. Dumbass seducing their wives. I need to talk to Janine." I escorted her out of the room, then pulled out my cell phone and called Janine's number. "Hello, Janine, it's Nick," I said in a strained voice. "Oh, Nick, thanks for calling. Are you going to start your investigation today?" she asked. "Actually, I've already finished it. You were more right than you think. Would you mind coming over to my place today or tomorrow?" We have some things to discuss, both personal and professional. Don't get me wrong, I'm not hitting on you, but this matter is very close to my heart, I explained. Would you like to talk more about it, Nick? She asked. Not over the phone. Tonight or tomorrow morning would be best. My assistant Danny will be with us. She has information to share with you as well, I told her. What is your address? I gave her my address and she said she would be here in 10 minutes. 11 minutes later, I heard a car pull up to the driveway. I checked. She arrived in a beautiful Jaguar XJ6. I opened the door for her and Danny brought coffee. I went and got our laptops. I put both on the coffee table, and Danny and I sat down on either side of Janine as I started to explain. Janine, Dennis is a serial con man who uses his professional authority and credibility to seduce women and betray their husbands behind their backs, I said. From what we've seen, he preys only on married women. There are no single women in these videos, Danny added. Each series of videos is about seduction. He gains their trust, then talks about fantasies or problems in their marriage. Using this information, he seduces them and gets them to do exactly what he wants. He doesn't force his sufferers or brainwash them. But as you can see, he is a serial offender, I said, showing her all the series of videos. She gasped at the sheer number. How the hell could he keep this a secret? She screamed, her face turning beet red with rage. Janine, calm down, please. There's more, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. More? She looked at me like I'd just fallen off another planet. Yes, as I said on the phone, this case is very close to my heart. You see, my wife was his latest sufferer. I showed her Samantha Carter's name on the highlighted video. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Nick. Janine hugged me tightly. He's going to pay for this. You can be sure of it. He'll pay through the goddamn back for this. Janine, how much is your husband worth? Monetarily, I'll sue him for alienation of affection and negligence, I said. Don't worry. I'll introduce you to the best divorce attorney in California. Wes will take care of you and get you as much as he can. Janine laughed. Oh, honey, Dennis is worth over $250 million, including his properties around the world. He has a lucrative practice, his books are bestsellers, and he's been a guest on Dr. Phil several times, but he made most of his money from his books. Okay, I propose we hit him with a blitzkrieg. We'll hit him hard and fast, but it will probably take a few days to prepare. Do you trust us? I asked, pointing to myself and Danny. Yeah, she said. You've lost a lot too, Nick. I'm sorry for that. I should have seen what a snake he was before. I understand. Come by my office in the morning and I'll introduce you to Wes. He's my attorney and will be handling my divorce from Samantha, as well as my lawsuits against your husband. By Friday, we hope to bring in other ex-husbands to sue him for malpractice and alienation of affection. I outlined my plan to her, and by the time I was done, she was nodding and smiling. I can go along with that. The problem is acting normal with him for 2 more days. I can claim I have a problem with women, or I can just go out of town to see my mom. She's old, so he'll probably buy that. Janine nodded. True, he's trained to notice differences in mood or behavior. My advice is to contact your mother. Tell her what's going on and ask her to cover for you. In the meantime, I have a guest room here with a double bed and room for 2 more cars in the garage. I smiled. So far, only my car and Danny's car were parked there. I handed her the garage door remote, and she gratefully accepted it. She went home to pack her things. Danny went home to pack as well. She packed her clothes for the whole week and came back a half hour later. I giggled as I watched her haul her stuff into my room and stack it in Sammy's old dresser. The girl is determined. I have to hand it to her. The next morning, Janine returned just as I got out of bed after another great night's sleep with Danny by my side. Danny was in the shower when I heard the garage door open. Janine looked great and gave me a sympathetic hug when I went out to meet her. She brought a small suitcase with a couple of changes of clothes and Danny's boys' account statements, which made me gasp at his liquid assets. Danny made breakfast for us, and after another great meal, Janine said she was ready to move on. I told her we could proceed once all the ex-husbands and wives were notified of the latest developments. We needed to call the 11 ex-husbands and have them inform their ex-wives about what was going on. We planned to file separate lawsuits against Dr. Dumptruck for negligence and alienation of affection, and they were more than happy to join us. Most of the husbands were eager for revenge on Zeus Rancidov, and most of the ex-wives were ready to go. But I wasn't bringing Sammy into this, not after seeing that last video. I showed up at Wes's office with 9 of the 11 ex-husbands we contacted and all 9 ex-wives. Since I was ex-husband number 12, I had to be involved in the case. Wes, to save time, drew up identical A of A and malpractice papers, just changing the names based on who was in line. He was like a kid in a candy store. More than $175 million of Dr. Dumbass's liquid assets and nearly $100 million in real estate worldwide would likely have to be liquidated to pay for malpractice, divorce, and A of A. Sure, a class action suit would have been easier, but we aimed for shock value. I wanted Dr. Dennis Linder to know his world was about to crumble around him like the walls of Jericho. Janine, Danny, and I waited at the end of the line while Wes helped the new crowd of clients make the a-hole's life miserable and get rich in the process. Wes is a good buddy of mine, but he's still a lawyer. When he finally finished printing out the malpractice and misdemeanor papers for his new clients and sent them on their way, promising to deliver them to Dr. Dingus at work early Monday morning with plenty of witnesses, it was Janine and my turn. I filed for divorce from Samantha, and Janine filed for divorce from her soon-to-be very poor ex-husband. Wes was immediately attracted to Janine, and the feeling seemed mutual. We agreed that each client's belongings would be delivered by different process servers simultaneously. Wes, Janine, and Danny joined me, grinning like skeletons. It was going to be packed on Monday morning, and Danny, Janine, and I would sit in the front row. As a bonus, Wes gave each of his clients a free restraining order against Dr. Dumbass. He knew how rich he'd get once all the fallout from this massive nuclear strike settled. Then came the time for Phase 2. Phase 2 involved saturating the media and law enforcement. I used video clips of Sammy, removing her face and replacing her voice with a computer-generated one, removing all mention of her or my names. Using a new media editor program I bought, I spliced together excerpts from different videos showing how Dr. Dennis Linder made a habit of seducing women, destroying happy or potentially happy marriages for his twisted ego. I used excerpts from videotapes of other women, showing how they manipulated their husbands at Linder's insistence. I knew the media would eat this story up. The FBI would be brought in on criminal negligence charges because he was ripping off men and doing it to their wives. The California Board of Psychologists would also take an interest. To do this, I created a dummy email account and used proxy servers to avoid being traced. Phase 2 began on Monday morning, right after the process servers had done their work. As the last process server was leaving, I handed Janine a bucket of popcorn, and she was munching on it when Dr. Linder came running out of the office, looking around wildly. He saw me standing next to his soon-to-be ex-wife and Danny. I picked up my cell phone, hit the send button on bulk email delivery, and started Phase 2. We got into my car and drove away while Dr. Linder incoherently screamed that he was going to eliminate us all. The last thing I saw of him that day was him kneeling in the parking lot, a bunch of papers in his hands, crying hard. My revenge wasn't even half finished. For the third step, we met with Samantha, and she agreed. She was staying with her in-laws and was about to find out she couldn't stay there unless she was very unlucky. We met in a very public place, Starbucks. I love that place. "I'm here. Does that mean you want to talk?" she asked hopefully, sitting down across from me. "Actually, I have something to tell you," I said with a smile. "Samantha, I could forgive you if you were coerced or brainwashed, but after 16 hours of agreeing to everything he said, you finally suggested I become a betrayed man. That's unforgivable." I shook my head. "Sammy, I loved you more than you can imagine. Loved. Past tense. This betrayal ended everything. You've already received the divorce papers." I held them out. "I think you'll find them fair." She looked at the papers in shock. "You're kidding me. I wasn't in my right mind. Baby, please, you have to believe me." She panicked. "If I were you, I'd figure out what to tell your parents. They just received an anonymous letter about you." I stood up and walked out, leaving her in stunned silence. Wes asked Janine out on a date, and she accepted. I vouched for his honesty. When she asked, I said, "He's a divorce lawyer." I shrugged. "I'll keep an eye on him," she grinned. "He's a nice guy. I wouldn't work with him if he wasn't," I reassured her. The next day, Wes called to say Sammy and her lawyer wanted to talk. I agreed and took Danny for moral support. "Okay, I'm here," I said, sitting across from Sammy and her lawyer, who resembled Gloria all red. Danny sat with me and Wes. "Mr. Carter, I'm Jean Albrook, representing your wife pro bono. She says you've destroyed her, and these terms are unacceptable," she said. "Miss Albrook, I have enough evidence to sway any judge and jury. My soon-to-be ex conspired with her lover to betray me. I believe my offer is more than adequate," I said, leaning back. "Where is that evidence?" Albrook asked. Wes opened a DVD with recordings of the last 2 sessions between Samantha and the doctor, my voice recorder, and the video from my iPhone showing them planning the affair and being engaged. "I have more if you want it," Wes said with a smirk. Albrook looked defeated. She consulted with Samantha, then said, "We agree, Mr. Carter." "Good decision." We signed the papers. Jean notarized them, and in 30 days, the case would go before a judge. Those 30 days dragged on. Danny and I kissed like teenagers, but I couldn't go all the way with her. I wanted to, but I was stubborn or stupid. By the end, I leaned toward stupidity. At last, the trial date came. We hadn't had any cases since Linder's, so it was satisfying to wait for the clock to tick down until we could be together officially. When the judge banged the gavel, I wrapped Danny in my arms and kissed her deeply. Sammy approached us as we parted. "I'm really sorry, Nick. I ruined the best thing I had. Danny, please take care of him and don't be as stupid as I was." "Sammy, I've loved Nick since I first saw him. I kept my distance because he loved you. But when you did what you did, I couldn't stand by anymore. I love him, and I promise to take care of him for the rest of our lives," Danny said. Sammy hugged her tightly. Danny moved in with me during the 30-day wait. We had plenty to keep us busy while waiting for either my stubbornness to fade or for the divorce to be finalized. When we got home from court, I took off my old wedding ring, threw it on the coffee table, then picked Danny up and carried her into our bedroom. It took 2.5 years for the full effects of my nuclear strike on Dr. Dennis Linder to subside. Many people were affected in various ways. Several couples separated by that a-hole's actions eventually reconciled and remarried after receiving settlements for their lawsuits. Good for them. I heard about Samantha shortly after all the malpractice and personal injury claims were settled against Dr. Diptard. She now lives in Vegas and has become a dominatrix, fitting with the crap Linder uncovered in her psyche. Her parents still aren't talking to her, thanks to the video I sent them of her and her lover plotting against me. Oh well, she brought it on herself. After Janine divorced him, she got a lot more than half. All the criminal charges hit old Denny like a ton of bricks. He pleaded guilty, lost his license, and had to file for bankruptcy. However, that didn't stop everyone he wronged from getting their due. It just delayed them a bit. Someone who shall remain nameless visited the good doctor one evening before his criminal trial began and strike him up so badly he had to be hospitalized for several weeks. He had both knees shattered, both arms broken, and both balls torn. How do I know all this? Don't ask and I won't lie to you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to clean my old aluminum baseball bat. Wes and Janine dated for 6 months and became so close they got married, with me as best man and Danny as maid of honor. Wes earned enough from all the lawsuits to retire, and they planned to spend their golden years together. The trial was open and shut because Dr. Fool's lawyer couldn't get the video of him seducing all those women into evidence. He was convicted on all counts, and when Denny went to prison, he lasted only 2 days before guards found him hanging in his cell. Apparently, he chose to end his life rather than face what he'd become. That's good. One less burden on society. The a-hole who ruined so many lives is now literally on the brink of end of life. Seems fitting to me. After his end of life, since he never changed his will, Janine was happy to use the large sum of money she inherited to pay off those whose lives her now-deceased ex-husband had ruined. As for Danny and me, we profited well from my lawsuits. $15 million in all. $15 million, I said, putting my pinky to my mouth. We are now retired too and raising 2 children. Our son Nicholas, since Danny insisted on giving him his full name, which I immediately agreed with, is a toddler and will start preschool next year. Isabel, our daughter, is the sweetest little girl I've ever seen. We're happy now. That case, my last case, was a mixed bag, but turned out all right in the end.